Dr. Christopher Puttock is a botanist with 4 decades experience in environmental conservation and habitat restoration. He's particularly concerned with the maintenance of ecosystems to function naturally, sustainably, and in preventing demise of ecological services by human exploitation, reaching past the tipping point where nature is not permanently damaged. Since moving to Maryland from Hawaii in 2008, Chris has been a research associate at the Smithsonian Institute, National Museum of Natural History, and executive director and CEO of Chesapeake Natives, Inc., the only local ecotype nursery producing hundreds of species of plants to sustain the native flora and fauna of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And he's current president of the Maryland Native Plant Society. He's supervised more than 40 environmental grants, including Rotary Global grants with environmental components. He is founding director of the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group, SRAG, and is its immediate past chair. He's a member of the Rotary Cadre of Technical Advisors. He's a regular speaker at Rotary clubs, botanical and native plant societies, master gardener, master naturalist, and garden clubs. He can speak on anything to do with the environment, biodiversity, ecosystem restoration, sustainable food production, environmental resilience, global warming, and the environment. Here's Chris, and his talk is Gardening with Local Ecotype Native Plants.
Right, well, thank you so much. It's great to be able to present on something that I've been working on for at least, 15 years here in Maryland, working with local ecotype native plants. So this is how I'd like to talk about the program this evening. Why garden with local ecotype native species? And I may call them LENS. I've used that around the place, these species as being local ecotype native species. And then I want to talk about where you can get them and why they are so hard to find. And now I want to show some examples of these plants, but I've given many presentations before, so I'm going to actually concentrate on plants that I haven't put in presentations in this particular presentation. Otherwise, you'll be here half the evening or maybe longer. So gardening our way out of biodiversity loss. This is what I see one of the things that we really have to do. Humans have put biodiversity out of balance. We have really broken the system. I want to ask the question, where have all the big animals and the big trees gone? Where have 3 billion birds gone in the last 50 years? This is in North America. Where have 85% of the butterflies gone in North America in the last 50 years? Where have so many of the bees gone? And why, when I drive down the road, when I was a kid, I just remember we used the windscreen wiper to wipe the bugs off the windscreen, not when it was raining. And so we used to have our windscreens covered by bugs when we were driving down the road. Okay, so we've changed a lot in 50 years, and I want to talk just a little bit about that in a minute. Just to set the context, as we generally do, native plants, I would like to say, are the plants that were found in this place, where you are, where you're sitting, where you're watching this presentation. This is the place where these native plants were. And so it depends on how big you want to put that perimeter around you as to say where the native line is. But what I would say is if a native plant is from the very place where you are right now. And a local ecotype is the genetics that's associated with that local population that is around you. And so the local ecotype can be usually, I would think, within 20 to 50 miles. It could be a little bit further than that, depends on the way it moves around, the way it's dispersed. I've grabbed this slide from another presentation that I used because I like to talk about the biodiversity crisis that we have. We think that we have a climate crisis going on right now, but really we have a biodiversity crisis. This biodiversity crisis has been going on for a long time, a lot longer than we've been recognizing climate change. And so just taking out just a couple of things from this slide, invasive species are a major problem for us. And also what we do with the environment with cutting down across the world, 15.3 billion trees a year we are losing. We are really changing this world dramatically. And so I want to just give a really easy example of seeing how this actually works. This is from Hawaii. This is Oahu, Prochardia martii. It's a species that was really common on this island of Oahu, in the valleys, in the on the floodplains, and so it had fruits on it that were edible, and they still are, of course, but they're edible to rats. So the rats that the Hawaiian, the Polynesians brought with them to Hawaii actually did a job on eating the fruits of this palm. And also the palm is tall, where it would have grown, and it would have been good tall, straight timbers for houses for the Polynesians, and the leaves made really good thatch. So this particular species didn't have very much chance. And so we actually can see what humans do when they get to a particular place. This slide shows from wetlands where this species would have grown mostly, what the change would be. So if you look on the left-hand side of this, you will see that the black block in the bottom, you don't have to read it, is where the Prochardia was at 600 years after Christ, the Common Era. And so we really know that the Hawaiians actually got to that island, those islands, around about 600 AD. And we can actually see what happened. The Prochardia disappeared. The cypress and the grasses and the ferns actually then started to fill those spaces and make more like a meadow than a forest. And so this is what happens when humans arrive in a place. So then my next thing is looking at North America. What happened 11,000 years ago when humans got to start to fill the North America? The mastodon disappeared around about 11,000 years ago. What change did that make to the environment? The smilodon, people know this as a saber-toothed tiger or cat, also died out around about the same time. So we were here making drastic changes to the North American continent very long time ago, 11,000 years, just after or around about the climate maximum of 10,000 years ago. And also the giant ground sloth. What would this animal have eaten in the forest and then have nothing to eat it after the humans took out this species, all around about the same time? Then moving more recently, 1900, this is a murmuration of passenger pigeons. It's a big cloud of pigeons flying up. There were something like 3 billion, between 5 and 3 billion passenger pigeons around about 1880. And then we decided that they weren't needed because they were eating our crops. And so we killed these passenger pigeons and made mountains of them, like the picture here. This is from 1884. Amazing. Now, what change would that loss of that species made to the environment? Well, what about in the bay? There are aquatic plants in the bay we are interested in. And so we had an oyster that was in the bay. The eastern oyster is still there. It's not the size of a dinner plate anymore. It's always down to the size of around about 3 to 4 inches at maximum. There were enough oysters in the bay to clean the bay every 2 to 3 days to make it clear water. And now there's not enough oysters in the bay to clean it in a year. The mountain of shells you see is from 1910, down at Hampton Roads in Virginia. And of course, then there's the American chestnut. We introduced a disease. Now, I'm sure we didn't do it on purpose in the 1880s, and that species was a keystone species across the whole of the deciduous forests in the Northeast. 3.5 billion trees, all essentially gone within 50 years. So by 1930, all these trees are gone. And there was a really great program on PBS TV the other day about the devastation that the loss of this species had. American ginseng. We know, because we actually did a survey of this back in 2012, of this in the 17 counties where in Maryland where the ginseng was, we could only find it in 4, and in those 4 counties in very small patches. Then there we have butterflies. These are canaries in the coal mine for us. They're, in 1980, about 150 species listed for Maryland. By 2012, there are 129 species cited in that 2 decades. A loss of some species, but really a loss of so many, not only the species, but the numbers, the sheer numbers of species, of individuals are dying. And so their life cycle, being the butterfly is the common part, but the larvae that eat the foliage of your native plants, these are the things that really are the keystone to managing the forests and the meadows. The larvae eat really specific plants. They are tied in to host plants, and these are generally groups of within a genus. And so when we lose the host plants, we lose the larvae, and we lose the butterflies, and we lose the birds. And so there's a chain reaction by loss of native plants through what we have going on. The checker spot is rare, very rare in Maryland. It was declared the state insect, the state butterfly, and I think that was in 1985. And now it is really precarious and likely to go extinct in our area if it's not really rescued. And one of the reasons why it has a very difficult lifestyle. It's not like most of the other butterflies that either migrate or pupate as within a hard shell and squirrel away in the forest somehow. These butterflies remain as a living larva that they form a little nest on a leaf, and then during the winter they actually crawl out of that and go into the dead grass and leaf litter, and finish overwintering there in the leaf litter and before the spring comes around. So they have a really different lifestyle from most of the other butterflies that we have. One of the other things about the Chelone, the butterfly is we recognize that it eats Chelone, at least the caterpillars do. And of the 5 other checker spots that we have across the North America, these also eat Chelone and penstemon and the introduced plantain, and then also some other species that we do have in Maryland, but we've never actually associated with our checker spot. And this might be species that we could look out for, the blue-eyed Mary. And of course, paintbrush is really quite a rare plant. And so we have difficulties, it has difficulties in finding that too. Okay, so the next thing is then the question why. I always ask the question, why do something? And so why garden with local native plants? And these are what I would say are answers. For us to help recover local ecosystem services, and I've been talking about those, for effective conservation of nature, for environmental sustainability, to see that the environment continues on into the future, to protect the environment, or simply for the butterflies, the bees, the birds, and the bats, and for biodiversity in general. So this is why I would suggest we want to garden with local ecotype native plants. And so this is just an example of what we would have. We will have the milkweed's best friend. You can see this guy is pulling out the polinium, these orange sacs from the very intricate flower of the milkweed. And of course, you have the milkweed's worst enemies, which is the milkweed tussock moth, at least I think it is, because they just lay thousands of eggs and those hatch, and then they would devour a whole plant. And then, of course, if you lose the milkweeds, you lose all these guys as well. The instar of the lady beetle, and that's eating away at all the aphids, the native aphid that's growing and living on the milkweed, and the anchor bug that's on the right will probably find some other place, but it won't be eating or sucking the juices out of a monarch caterpillar. Of course, we could do something about the Bambi. The cougar is now disappearing across most of the United States, and it would be a really great control of deer instead of cars. Okay, so what now? So how do we garden with local ecotype native species when they're so hard to find? And I'm going to suggest that there are 3 organizations that are really working very hard to be very strict about their material that they grow and distribute to anybody that wants to come and buy them. And these are local ecotype native species, and they do not grow grow cultivars. They are not interested in selling cultivars. There's Sangha just across the river in Virginia, Chesapeake natives in Upper Marlborough, and Environmental Concern on the Eastern Shore. There are quite a number of other native plant growers, and but a lot of them bring in material from outside of the watershed, and so many of them mix their resources with cultivars. So beware of that. What a cultivar does is, well, often we don't know, but it's certainly using resources that are within the plant for a different purpose. And so it could be then they're not using the flowers to attract the insects that they would otherwise be doing. Or they may be making the chemistry of the leaves different in some way or another. Lots of different things could be happening when you're growing cultivars. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about next is what sorts of plants one might look at as putting into your native plant garden. And so I want to give some examples now from presentations that I haven't given to Maryland Native Plant Society. So I'm not going to be talking about Asclepias, and I'm not going to be talking about the peas, and I'm not going to be talking about quercus, and about a dozen other different presentations. Okay, so why is it hard to grow or propagate native plants? Is we have to understand what winter stratification is. So winter stratification is where we are trying to gather seed to go through winter as it would in nature. And so what we do is gather those seed in the fall, and we put them into the seed into Ziploc bags at 40 degrees and a bit of moisture in there, and that will stratify them over winter and basically give them the idea that winter has happened. You can actually trick them into starting to grow earlier if you do this. Shrubs and trees may need 2 winters to go through that cycle, but there are some species so I've indicated here the types of of plants that do this. Most of them are fall flowering plants. So asters, goldenrods, ironweeds, milkweeds, lobelias, culver's root, and there's quite a number of others. Anything that basically flowers in the fall will need a winter stratification. The winter stratification, if you move further south, would actually be shorter than the winter stratification if you move further north. Ours is around about 3 months. Now, if plants produce flowers and fruits in the spring and early summer, they would generally need a 3-month warm stratification, a different process. So keeping them warm in dark and dry conditions through the summer, and then you can germinate them in the fall. And they will then overwinter as rosettes, or else you could keep them keep them going into the spring. There are some exceptions, and mints and violets and peas, there's no need. We'll come back to that in a minute. And so I just want to now run through some plants that we have in our nurseries in Sangha and Chesapeake Natives that you may look at as potential things to put in your garden that you might not have seen before. A lot of these plants will have been eaten by deer. If I've got a slash through the deer, then the deer usually do not eat it unless they're really hungry. Okay, so Dolingeria infirma, Ionactis, and I've indicated the pearly crescent butterfly there as needing this particular plant to grow on. This is not a very common species. It is usually on the edges of ultramafic areas and particularly sandy areas. Syricocarpus. Then Eurybia. This is actually quite widely grown and often seen. This is deer resistant. Deer don't like it. If you go up to Longwood Gardens right now, you'll see it's virtually finishing, but underneath all the trees around Longwood Gardens, Longwood House has a lot of whitewood aster there, but a common species in the forest as well. And then Symphotrichums. What I call the frost aster group, the ones that are generally late in the season, Ericoides and Laterifolium, Calico aster. These are all flowering or just finished flowering now, and they have seed on them, and they are late flowering. Pilosum also probably the largest of the frost asters. Cordifolium, getting into some of the blue ones. We just have white asters. Now we have some blue asters. This one I would keep away from deer. A lot of these Symphotrichums are deer candy, and so the deer will like to take these. Smooth blue aster. Novo Benglii, New York aster. Most of these asters are the host for the pearly crescent that I showed you before. This one is for the silver checker spot larva, oblongifolium. This is aromatic aster. It actually has a bit of a scent to it, and that's why it's called aromatic. Grows in full sun. Symphotrichum nova Englii. This is generally pruned by deer wherever I see it. It's generally, it will get up to more than 4 feet high, but generally it's largely pruned back. And it's easy, if you want to keep the species low in your garden, then it's easy to trim it just like a deer would. Symphotrichum patens is probably what I think is the prettiest or the most spectacular of our asters. It has has really iridescent, almost blue, light blue ray florets, and it has the largest ray florets of anything we have around. Punicium, if you want something for the wetter areas. So this is purple stem aster. It grows essentially in your rain garden or alongside the rain garden. It does very well there. It's very suitable for swampy areas. Moving on to some of the solidagos. I haven't presented on solidagos before, so here we go, a couple of solidagos for you. The slender golden top. This gets to a little 3 feet high. It will get a little bit taller if it's in really good condition areas, but it's 3 foot is a good height for it, and it's quite a spectacular cluster of flowers, as you can see, heads all together. Another Euthamia, flat top, golden top, a little bit smaller, around about generally 1.5, doesn't really ever get to 3 feet, but it will in the best conditions. But it's much thinner, weaker, and certainly not so dense as the previous one. Solidagos, this is the bicolor. This is the only one that really appears to be white. The disc florets are yellow or cream, and the ray florets are white. All the other goldenrods that we have yellow ray florets. Cassia, Solidago cassia, wreath goldenrod. This is quite spectacular as a low-growing plant in the shade. It does better in full shade than it does in part sun, so it's actually towards the forest, and one of the few plants that we do have that grows well in the full shade. And it's quite spectacular with all the heads of the along, essentially look as though they're along the stem. Solidago canadensis, Canada goldenrod. This is the tallest goldenrod you see around. It gets to about 5 feet. We've only just got this into the nursery down at Chesapeake Natives. So it hasn't actually appeared for sale as yet. And we were just a little bit skeptical that anybody would really want a tall, straight goldenrod that's about 5 foot high. So we've been reluctant to get that into production, but we do have it. Solidago erecta. This is we have a single stem rising up with the florets all along the top part of the stem, rather than cascading like so many of the others are. Solidago flexicourse grows in the forest, full shade. This is a zigzag goldenrod, and the stem really does look as though it just zigzags. The leaves of this have serration. They're serrate or dentate on the edges, and so it's really a very easy one to identify, particularly in if you know where you're looking in the forest, it's going to be there along the Potomac. The early goldenrod, Juncea, and this, as it says, it really is the first goldenrod to come out. You'll see it in usually late July, early August, as the goldenrod. You think, oh, winter's on its way, if you're seeing this goldenrod starting to come. Solidago nemoralis, very interesting with Solidago nemoralis because there are diploid and tetraploid populations of this species. The eastern group is diploid, so only has half the number of chromosomes as the population from beyond the other side of the Appalachians. And if you're getting Solidagos from prairie moon or somewhere like that, you may well be getting the tetraploid. The tetraploid is much more aggressive. It has a rhizome, underground rhizome that actually is quite aggressive, whereas the eastern one does not do that. Solidago odora, sweet goldenrod. Yes, it's scented. And this is a late flowering species, and is a really good source of nectar. And very dense, small flowers, all they're secund, they're essentially all along one side of the axis of the stem. Solidago puberula, downy goldenrod, probably the most robust of the erect goldenrods that we have. Does grow on dry soil. And I think this might be the last one, wrinkle leaf goldenrod. This one is often called, no, you see it in the trade, it's called fireworks. And even in the wild, they look just like fireworks, just like this picture here. And when that species went into cultivation, I suspect that they didn't do very much. They probably just put a name on it as a cultivar. And because it's really quite spectacular as it is. Sempervirens, seaside goldenrod. This is certainly the biggest and with the broadest leaves of any of the goldenrods that we have. Okay, I just want to change tack just a little bit and talk about the plants that don't need they don't need stratification. They actually will germinate by themselves at any time during the year. So this species I've included in here. I don't have it in any of the nurseries. I don't think it's in Earth Sangha. Certainly not in Chesapeake Natives right now. It's an S3. It's declining. Its flowers are not spectacular at all. They're small, white, and close to the stem. Generally, you just see a green plant. But it's a species I think that we should be looking for and getting into cultivation because, and certainly into our gardens, because we don't really know what it's going to be supporting. And so having a species that's going, it's an S3, losing its ground, and we don't know very much about it, I think it's a really good thing to start looking out for. Sorry, this slide just did get out of place. So no stratification is required for mints and violets. You just sow them in the fall. And then for peas, these will germinate on demand by scarification. So basically taking a file and breaking the seed coat will let moisture into the seed and then the germination will start. And that's what scarification does. Otherwise, you can just wait and for 1 or 2 or 3 years until the seed coat breaks down naturally, and then it will germinate by itself. Okay, so let's look at some violets, and then I'll finish out with some mints. And so with the violets, we have some yellow violets, smooth yellow, and the downy yellow violet. All of these violets are very interesting in the seed pods throw the seeds out. And so basically when the seed is released, the pod is opened, the seed is gone. You don't see it for much more than a few minutes after the pod is open. The other thing about these violets are that violets have two styles of flower. One, the spring flowering violets, when you see the flowers in the spring, these are generally sterile. And the fall flowers on the violets are generally fertile. And those flowers are really close to the ground. They may be right at the ground level, and these are cleistogamous flowers. They don't need anybody else to come and fertilize them. They will do it themselves. So those are the two yellow ones. I want to talk about some of the blue ones. So this is the long-spurred violet. It's really quite remarkable because the spur that sticks out the back is actually occupying the space of the anthers. So the anthers have a long tail to them, and that's what the tail of this particular species is. It's really quite, and there's only one species like it in Maryland, and so it's a really great plant to have. We have it in the nursery by accident because it came with some ferns that we got from in Virginia. Violet striata, the cream violet. So going to cream, the violets are the hosts of the fritillary butterflies. And so we see a lot of the fritillary butterfly around, but we don't see very many of the caterpillars. The caterpillars are small and green. No, so violets are there doing something for the butterflies. Primrose leaf violet. This is rather interesting because it has the lateral petals are really close in, so causing a bit of a almost like a trunk. And the interesting thing about this is the insects that are coming to actually using the keel, the bottom petal, as the guide to get into the plant. And then the laterals, and I'll show you this again in a minute, have hairs on them. So they actually dust or have something to do with the insect as it goes in to help guide the insect into the flower. Violet pedata, the birdfoot violet. This is the violet that's on the logo of Chesapeake Natives. Sagittata rather, the arrowleaf violet, really very distinctive leaf shape for this. Of course, the distinctive leaf shape on the bird's foot is really highly divided leaf. And then the last of the violets is Sororia that I'm showing you, and this actually really shows you the hairs that are on the lateral petals, with the guideline for the insect to come in. The insect is not usually seeing purple, so it's probably just seeing white and black. And so the guide of the insects is coming, seeing the landing zone, and then being ushered in by the hairs through down into to where the anthers are. And the common violet, this is very interesting that it comes in both white and purple and everything in between. I just want to give you a quick look at next year's program, because we're going to be dealing with mints, and I've never given a presentation here on mints, and so I thought I'd just throw in a few mints for you to look at. The yellow giant hyssop, and it attracts lots of bees, bee flies. Clinopodium vulgare, wild basil. You can actually use this for eating. Common dittany, also as a herb. Monarda punctata, Clinopodia. This is the white bergamot. The bergamots have scented flowers. Some of the mints have scents, and others don't. Crimson bee balm. This is a real trick. There's a lot of Monarda didyma in the trade and in people's gardens. If you're taking plants from people's gardens, they're likely to have a hybrid that is sterile, and so you will not get any seed from these. No, it's still out there in the wild, and it attracts hummingbirds. Monarda fistulosa, wild bergamot. So that was for Piedmont, and this is for more of the mountains. Piedmont, and then coastal plain with punctata, spotted bee balm. I think this is probably the most fantastic looking plant that we have, with these pink bracts, the flower, which is yellow and spotted, sitting in here like a claw. And these are, as you may well know, and we're certainly going to hear a lot about, these are called verticillasters. So the flowers are coming out as a verticel, so as a whorl around the stem. And so you have these series of whorls of flowers coming up the stem, and you can see them here. And so this looks like almost like a wedding cake sort of design. But who would have designed a wedding cake with pink flowers and yellow and brown flowers and pink bracts? Not a human eye, I don't think. Physostegia, obedient plant. This is now only on the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula, but in people's gardens it's quite common. And where you have it, I don't know why it was ever called obedient plant, because it doesn't stay where you want it. It is quite disobedient when it comes to being an obedient plant. It doesn't stay.
It has to do with the flowers. If you move them, they stay put. That's what I heard.
Okay, so I'm hearing comments from Jill saying that if you move the flowers, they stay put. Okay, Prunella vulgaris, common self-heal. This is also a species that's in Europe as well as North America, and so it's a lot of the material that we have around Maryland is hybridized with the European plants, and so this is a very difficult one to know whether you've got something that's actually wild, but it's used as a vegetable if you want to use that. Some pycnanthemums. I just wanted to talk about some pycnanthemums. In Doug Tallamy's books, he talks about the mountain mints as being some of the most attractive for insects, and they certainly are. These, if you want a lot of insects to come to your garden, some of these pycnanthemums are really the way to go. So Pycnanthemum incarnum, Pycnanthemum muticum, which is the one that is featured in Doug Tallamy's book. I think it says something like 450 or 545 or something. It's a massive number of species that he's seen come to Pycnanthemum muticum. And in terms of being robust and there's a species that stands up without any other plants around to support, this is one that does very, very well. As I've got here on this one is a little skipper, but it's really very prolific with insects that comes to it. Tenuifolium, the narrowleaf mountain mint. Generally see this on forest edges, and it's a fairly weak plant and tends to fall over. It will grow, so it needs other plants around to support it. A little bit stronger is Virginia mountain mint. Flowers are a little bit bigger as well, a little bit more attractive. Grows in the wet. Lyleaf sage, if you want to replace your lawn, this is a really good plant to put in it because it will throw its seeds around the lawn and generate a lot of green foliage on the ground level. And you can just mow over it, the plant will come back up again. Scutellaria integrifolia, helmet flower. This is another species that's really, it behaves really strangely. Some years it will have big flowers that are around about ½ an inch long. Other years the flowers will be really small. And so It's really an odd species. You're never quite sure what you're going to get with Integrifolia. Laterifolia, blue skullcap, really dense plant, gets lots of many small flowers, hundreds, thousands of small flowers on it. Good for rain gardens and tolerant to salt. Teucrium canadensis, Canadian germander. This produces very long rhizomes, and as I say, it spreads very well by rhizomes, and I mean that. If you put it in your garden in the right place, it will be popping up everywhere. It will be, those rhizomes, not quite as long as, say, Asclepias syriaca, but will have a very good challenge to see that is there. It's a really nice plant, grows really quite easily, and will come back year after year. And finally, blue vervain, and this tends to be hit in late summer with some sort of insect that likes to chew this one a lot. So it's obviously supporting something that's really good, good nectar plant for small bees. So to close out, I'd just like to say, if you're gardening with local ecotype species, what you're doing is you're using plants that keystone caterpillars eat. So you're using plants that will support many things in your garden. Caterpillars are the host plant specialists, and so they need, if you want a lot of different caterpillars, you need a wide range of plant diversity in your garden. If you're collecting seed, collect it locally. If you're buying plants, you can just insist on local ecotype native plants. And when you plant a plant, the insects that you've probably never seen before will find your plants. They will come. And they will come and lay their eggs on your plants. I have a very good friend, Mace Vaughan, who's with the Xerces Society, and he came to visit, and he was just amazed by the number of different bees we had in our garden, just because we have maybe 150 different native plants in the garden. But that's the whole thing. If you've got a lot of different species, you are going to have a wide range of native insects that are coming to your garden. Then I suggest you don't cut down the overwintering stems. If your neighbours let you keep the plants at the heights you want them, and they're not objecting to your place looking overgrown or dead with old stems, please don't cut them down, because they're going to have the various insects that are overwintering, that we don't even recognize that are overwintering there, because they're just going to blend in with those dead stems. So then, as I say, the stems and the soil are homes for the non-migratory pollinators. They're going to be there. And then, of course, never use insecticides. The pollinators will die, including the birds. And then, if you need practice with growing native plants, volunteer as a native plant grower at one of the nurseries. They're always looking for help. And if you want those plants to be there, then this is going to expand their what they have available to you. So my closing message is, we all have an opportunity to change the places that we are managing for nature into something that resembles what was here long before we were, long before us. So I encourage everyone to seek out local ecotype native species and turn your place into an extension of the homegrown national park. And I'll finish with this slide. which helps you get to that location, Homegrown National Park, and then ask if there are any questions. This is a pollinator garden we put in at Spring Hill Lake in 2011. It is still going really very strongly. Thank you. I'm ready to answer any questions.
Hi. Thanks, Chris. That was wonderful. I'm wondering if you couldn't say a few words about how to responsibly collect seed. You know, that it's not really okay to go into parks and so forth. Could you just talk about what the process is for Chesapeake natives and how to do that if you're a private homeowner trying to figure out how to do this?
Right. So with Chesapeake natives right now, we have most of the species that we want to have in the collection. We're actually growing our own plants in garden beds, and from those garden beds we then harvest the seed, and we actually have more seed than we need. And so we would really like people to come down and help us harvest seed, and then you would be able to take some away with you. But let me just say, the way, if I was going at if I found a new species that is not in the collection, I would generally, you take just 20% of the seed that's on a plant. The rest you leave behind. And generally we do that for as many plants as we could find. So we get some from maybe up to 50 different plants. So we're actually collecting a wide variety of genetics within the seed collection. We don't want to collect all the seed from one plant, because then it makes our production weaker, because it's all from the same parent, which is not what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to preserve biodiversity and the genetic diversity of a species. And so we want to have more seed from different plants within a population. So does that help? The rule of thumb for that is no more than 20% of a plant it should be collected.
We've got lots of neighbors in Scientist Cliffs, hi Warren, who want to replace their lawn, but they want to be able to keep it low because of all of the ticks. A lot of us have had Lyme disease. And so they've asked me to tell them about plants that they could plant that would either stay below 3 inches or that they could mow. So Chris, when you were talking about lyre leaf sage and the violets, it occurred to me that we've already got many violets in our yard. We haven't reseeded. We're just letting it go. In fact, we've told the lawnmower guy to not come back next year. We're just going to let it grow and see what happens. But I'm wondering, I think that lyre leaf sage, because it grows low, Lauren Hubbard gave me one, and it is doing fantastic. It made flowers immediately, practically after I planted it. So I'm wondering if I told my neighbors, just strategically plant lyre leaf sage all over in your yard, or violets, and then what, not mow it? Would they then bloom, and then they'd make those little seed pods, and then they'd spray their seeds all over? Would those seeds then outcompete their turf grass? Depending, like our turf grass is really weak. It's basically nothing. Is that a strategy to tell them to get rid of their lawns?
Well, it's certainly a strategy that's worked really well in my garden. So we've been deleting our lawn, and it's certainly being taken over by both violets, the Sororia violet, which is the common, it's so often called the Confederate violet as well, and then lyre leaf sage grows really very easily. Just wait for it to put up those stems. They come up to around about 1 foot high. They'll have a lot of seed in them. There's usually 4 seed in each flower. and then they'll be dispersed really easily, and so you can easily fill. You can even collect them and make sure your plants get really even more dense.
Exciting.
So, yeah, but I would I don't know if deer ticks, if that's really the solution. But if you want to have a flat area that's open, then maybe you've got it right there. But I think growing up plants that are taller, because deer ticks are actually moved around by many more things than just deer.
Right.
Yeah.
The white-footed mice are the main
Yeah,
thing.
the mice, the squirrels, all sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think people are like mowing close to the edge, the woodland lawn edge, and they just feel that if they keep their lawn low, that when they walk through it, the ticks won't, whatever that thing is that's called when they're hanging out, waiting for somebody to walk by, they just don't want to be touched by things as they're walking through their lawn. Right. And I get that.
Yeah. So when I started gardening with native plants, I was fortunate to get slips from all kind of other enthusiasts. And some of them were very particular to say, oh, this is a local ecotype. But I didn't keep very careful records. And so I know I have some, and I bought plenty from Chesapeake natives too, that I know were local ecotypes. But is there any way to tell after the fact to know what you have? Or does it require like a microscope and a degree in botany to figure that out?
I think you need more than a degree in botany and a microscope to be able to tell.
DNA.
Yeah, and that's, I think at that point, you just have to go with what you have. And if you want to replace them in time, then replace them. But I think most of the plants that you would have are probably, if they come from Chesapeake natives, fine. If they come from local people, there's a very good chance that they...
I think they're fine. I just wanted to share them, and I wanted to make a point to share ones that I knew were local, but I don't really recall.
But you certainly know, if you don't remember the species, we could probably tell you, send us a photograph of everything and we'll be able to tell you what you have. Mm-hmm. And then we can tell you whether it came from us. Likely, unless you've been buying from Earth Sangha or somebody else, All right.
In my house, and also some other tall plants. I do leave them up over the winter, but I'm always curious, when do I cut them down? Because I think I need to cut them down for the new stuff to grow in. I mean, it's pretty thick, actually. It makes a nice screen from the street.
Well, ordinarily the other growth would take over, and the previous season will. If it's a perennial, then the previous season's growth will be displaced. It'll be essentially rotting at the base where the old season was, because it's dead, and so it'll eventually fall out. If it's a perennial if it's a perennial grass, the new growth of grass will come out over the top of the last year's growth. So there's no real reason for cutting, and certainly in nature, there's nobody here to cut the plants back. And so it's just a natural cycle for them to stand up in place.
So what I have out there is a big mix of like Canada goldenrod and the cup plant. I think it's Cupressaceae.
Yes. Cup plant is in the Asteraceae, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyways, those stems are like really tall and really thick, and there's so many of them, and they look dead in March and April. And does it kill all the insects if I need to cut some just to like have breathing room for the new ones to come in?
I would cut down the cup plant because it's not actually native here, but so it will have some things on it. I would just lay them down alongside or something like that, or put them aside. So the fallen stems will still be host to the plants, as long as you're just not burying them or anything like that.
Someone wanted to know if you sell sedges at Chesapeake Natives.
Yes, we do sell sedges. Do we sell sedge at Chesapeake Natives? We have around about 20 different species of sedge. We don't usually concentrate on Pennsylvania sedge. There's a lot of that in the trade, and we tend to steer away from things that are really highly in the trade. But we have had that in this last year, and certainly it flies out of the door. Everybody knows it, everybody wants it, but we would like people to have more variety. We'd like them to have the foxtail so we have a wide variety of sedges, and also we have some Cupressus and some other cypress. We have quite a number of different Cyperaceae, and we also have a few in the rushes. We have some rushes.
Someone asked, can you talk about wild ginger as a ground cover?
Wild ginger grows in the shade. It likes to be a little bit moist. It is a good ground cover as long as you keep the moisture up. It will grow on most ground. It likes to have a little bit loose soil, but it will grow on quite hard soil. I've been growing it underneath the maple, and it struggles there because the roots of the maple are quite close to the surface. But if it's got a few inches of soil, then it will grow quite well. As a really dense ground cover, it's really quite amazing, and it has those beautiful little maroon flowers that hide underneath the leaves.
Someone else had a question. Laura, I thought Canada goldenrod was not native to Maryland, and also Ennis hyssop.
Yeah, both species are native to Maryland, I believe. I can't do anything without checking that out, but I will get back to you. But I believe both species are. And it's which the yellow hyssop? No. And so yeah, Annis hyssop is not native. The blue one is not native to Maryland. The yellow one, or pale cream one, is native to Maryland.
I believe Canada goldenrod is native to Maryland, but it's unusual. We usually find tall goldenrod, Solidago altissima, but it's usually on size.
Okay.
I'm
So
not sure people could hear that.
yeah. So I'm getting a comment from Judy saying that Canada goldenrod is in Maryland, but it's not common. The most common one is altissima, which is the one that's generally seen along roadsides, is the tall goldenrod. Okay, so Lauren?
I see a lot of discussion about people trying to figure out what's native and what's not native. And it might be good to give a little, we could talk about Wes's talk, we could talk about the Maryland Biodiversity Project. You know, it might be good to just talk a little bit about, like, how do you decide for Chesapeake natives what counts as native to Maryland, and perhaps even the Piedmont coastal and mountains.
Okay, so basically what we've done with native plants for deciding whether things are here is basically look through the historic records and to find out whether a species was known here. And so species that one would have anticipated being here, and this is what Wes Knapp has been doing, is essentially looking through the historic records, trying to find out whether species were here. And so when I asked him the question, well, what about species that are around Maryland, so Delaware and West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Virginia. Why are they not in Maryland? It's generally because we never recorded them. They were never recorded in the early documentation of what was here. And maybe the agriculture, which basically took out 80% of the forest of Maryland to turn it into various farms, changed the landscape. And a lot of the species were probably lost through that. And once the species is gone, then we don't know that it was really here unless we had a record of the piece of a plant that was put onto a herbarium sheet and stuck in a herbarium. Then questions about whether it's coastal plain or Piedmont. This is basically on distribution again from the Maryland records. So now most of the collection, if not all the collection, of the Brown Herbarium at University of Maryland, which is the best collection of Maryland plants. It's not a great collection, but it's the best collection. And now indicating where plants were found or known. So that gives a good idea of where they were fairly early on. Duplicates were sent to Smithsonian, so there's a collection there as well, but they're largely duplicating the same collections from Maryland. Unfortunately, Maryland has, in its representation of herbarium material from prior to 1950, and even probably from 2000 now, the second worst collection in the nation. We rank next to North Dakota in its representation in herbarium collections.
All right. Yeah, so I have some volunteer late bone set that has showed up in my gardens, and I was wondering if that's native to Piedmont and how aggressive is it? And is it something I should keep? Because the bees seem to love it.
Okay, so this is Eupatorium serotinum, correct? The late bone set, yeah. So it's widespread.
Okay.
And whether it was always widespread, it's certainly along roadsides. Roads are really great for moving plants around. So the Eupatoriums are deer resistant. The deer don't like them. That's why you see them. That's and they have fine seeds that are really moved by. They have little shuttlecocks on. Basically, the seeds are shuttlecocks, and they just blow around in the wind, and so they can move around a lot. Just trying to remember the distribution. It's a widespread species across the whole of the east of the United States.
Okay, thank you.
So serotinum, yeah, late flowering.
Is everything that's for sale at Chesapeake Natives native to the coastal plain?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
And
But
when I'm ordering from you, how can I know which, is there in the description, does it say?
some of them I've indicated whether it's common or no, across the coastal Piedmont and mountains. Let me just say this. The majority of the species, I would say around about 80% of the species are from the coastal plain. At Chesapeake Natives, we sit on the last little piece of Piedmont. And so we have Piedmont species there as well. And so that in the park, we have Piedmont species as well as coastal plain species. And so this is at Rose River State Park. And so we then with the Piedmont species we have, that would take up to 95 to almost 98%. We have very few plants that are outside the Piedmont. In fact,
Okay, so if we live in the coastal plain, we would be safe getting any of them because they're kind of transitional Piedmont. I mean,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And certainly if you want to ask the question to Kelly or Linda or myself when you're buying, then we can
Okay.
tell you. But most of the plants that we would have on the plant signs will actually say whether they're from the coastal plain or from the Piedmont. But as I say, if it's more likely to say it's from the Piedmont and not say that it's from the coastal plain. You see what I'm saying? Because the majority of our plants come from Prince George's County and Arundel County, and a few come from Montgomery County. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, but so it's on the, if we come to Rosaryville, it's there, but it's not on the website.
It's going to be on the plant. The plant data that's on the website should be the same as the signs.
Oh, okay.
And so
All right.
it should be there.
All right. Thank you.
And Kathy, you could always use Wickley's Flora to check whether it's Piedmont or there's Flora Virginia to check whether it's Piedmont or coastal plain.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. And this is Susan Rudy. I know Jill and Warren and Jean would call me a feeble creature for not knowing the cup plant was not native, but it is a volunteer. Maybe I'll try and get rid of it.
It's really hard to get out. I've got one in my garden. I've been trying to dig it out for years, and it's just the last little piece that's really deep will keep coming back.
Well, I can start working on it. But my other question is about, I have a yard in an old neighborhood, and I have several fairly nice sized hemlocks in my back little yard, which are wonderful, excepting that underneath the hemlocks, there is a very nice bed of English ivy. And I am wondering, is there some approach to start working on getting that ivy out without damaging the roots of the hemlock? And then if I did, could I replace, could I start planting something else in there instead of the English ivy if I could get the English ivy out?
It's shallow rooted.
Yeah, I know. So I was hearing exactly what I was going to say. So the English ivy is shallow rooted, so you can just go in and take it out. And so the most important thing about clearing an area is work on the size of area you can actually manage, and just then for the first year, just go in and take out the part that you actually need to keep clean, and then next year go in a bit further. And just keep on going, but the hemlock should be fine. It's not going to have. You're not going to damage the roots by pulling the English ivy. You're more likely to damage the trunk if it's climbing up the trunk.
Well, but the English ivy is going to take the water from the tree, so she needs to get rid of it.
Yeah. So you can. Yeah. I'm hearing just get rid of it all from the gallery out here.
Right, that's fine. But would I want to try and plant something else under there is the other part of the question.
Yeah, I would think of Pachyra aurea, or it depends on what sort of size of plant, how tall you want it to grow underneath.
Mulch it.
Yeah, you could mulch it. I would know if you want a grass that's going to really fill in really quickly, I would put Chasmanthium latifolium, wood oats, but then that will escape to all sorts of other places that you might like as well. Thank you so much, and please everyone think about coming along and joining us in person, because we have a nice big room, and we are all very well spaced, and we're all looking forward to getting back together rather than seeing each other on screen.